"Sir, I need to see proof of income before I can seat you in business class." The flight attendant's words echoed through Terminal 3 at JFK Airport as she stared down at a man in simple jeans and a hoodie, completely unaware that she was speaking to David Washington, the same billionaire who had just finished a $2.3 billion acquisition deal that morning. What she didn't know was that in exactly 14 minutes and 37 seconds, her phone would buzz with a termination notice. Not just hers, but everyone who was about to humiliate this man based on nothing but his appearance. Because David Washington wasn't just rich. He was about to become the owner of the entire airline she worked for. But before we dive into the most expensive revenge story in aviation history, smash that like button, subscribe if you want more stories of justice served ice cold, and comment below. What would you have done in David's position? This is October 15, 2024, Flight A847 from New York to Los Angeles. Departure time, 3:15 p.m. David Washington had just walked out of the Carlisle Hotel after closing a deal that would make international headlines within hours. But right now, he looked like any other passenger: Nike hoodie, dark jeans, a simple backpack, and AirPods in his ears. Here's what nobody knew. David Washington, 42 years old, had started from nothing. Grew up in Detroit, mother worked 3 jobs, father wasn't in the picture. By 25, he was coding software in his garage. By 35, he'd sold his first company for $800 million. By 40, he was running a private equity firm that specialized in one thing: buying struggling companies and turning them around. And this morning, he'd just acquired controlling interest in 3 major corporations. But his biggest move was still to come. As he approached Gate A7, David checked his phone. A text from his assistant, Maria: "Skybridge Airline stock down 23% today. Board meeting tomorrow. They're desperate for a beer." David smiled. He'd been watching Skybridge for months. Poor management, discrimination lawsuits piling up, stock price in free fall. The perfect acquisition target, but he wanted to see their operation firsthand before making his move. That's why he booked business class on Skybridge Flight 2847, not because he needed the upgrade, he owned private jets, but because he wanted to experience their customer service as a regular passenger. What he was about to experience would cost Skybridge everything. Next, called out Sandra Mitchell, senior flight attendant, 15 years with Skybridge, known for her selective customer service. She looked up from her tablet as David approached the business class check-in counter. Her smile immediately faded. Eyes scanned him from head to toe: the hoodie, the jeans, the backpack that probably cost more than her monthly salary, but she didn't recognize the brand. "Sir, I think you might be in the wrong line," Sandra said, her tone already shifting. "Economy check-in is over there." David handed over his boarding pass without a word. "Business class, seat 2A, fully paid." His name printed clearly: David Washington. Sandra stared at the pass like it was written in hieroglyphics. Then she looked at her computer screen, fingers tapping aggressively on her keyboard. "There must be some mistake," she muttered. "This seat is reserved for our Platinum Elite members." "I'm a Platinum Elite member," David said calmly. Behind Sandra, flight attendant Kevin Barnes, young, cocky, fresh out of training, leaned over to look at the screen. "Yo, Sandra, check his credit card, probably stolen or something." The words hung in the air like poison gas. David's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. In his AirPods, Maria's voice crackled through. "David, I'm monitoring social media. There's already buzz about discrimination on airlines today. Be careful." But David wasn't thinking about being careful. He was thinking about the 847 employees at Skybridge who were about to learn a very expensive lesson about judging people by their appearance. "Sir, I'm going to need to verify this boarding pass," Sandra announced loudly enough for other passengers to hear. Several business travelers in expensive suits turned to watch the commotion. She picked up a red phone, the kind used for security issues. "Security to Gate A7, possible fraudulent boarding pass situation." David remained completely calm. He pulled out his phone and opened his banking app. Account balance: $2,847,392,847. But he didn't show it, not yet. Instead, he called a number. On the third ring, Washington Holdings, this is Maria. Maria, David said, his voice steady but with an edge that made nearby passengers lean in. I need you to execute the Skybridge acquisition plan. Today, sir. Maria's voice was confused. I thought we were waiting until tomorrow's board meeting. Change of plans. I want controlling interest purchased within the next 15 minutes. Use the Cayman accounts. Price is no object. Sandra was still on her security call, describing David as a suspicious individual attempting to board business class with questionable documentation. Kevin smirked to his colleague, flight attendant Lisa Rodriguez, bet you $5 he's got a fake Rolex too. That's when David heard something that made his blood run cold. Behind him, a little girl, maybe 8 years old, tugged on her mother's sleeve. Mommy, why are they being mean to that man? He didn't do anything wrong. Her mother, clearly embarrassed, whispered back, sometimes people make mistakes, sweetie. But the little girl shook her head, that's not a mistake. They're being mean because of how he looks, out of the mouths of babes. David turned around and smiled at the little girl. What's your name? Sophie, she said with the confidence only children possess. Well, Sophie, you're absolutely right, they are being mean. But don't worry, sometimes mean people learn very expensive lessons. David's phone buzzed, a text from Maria, stock purchase complete. You now own 51% of Skybridge Airlines. Congratulations, you're the new majority owner. David looked at Sandra, who was still arguing with security over the phone. Then he made another call. This one went directly to the Skybridge corporate headquarters. Skybridge Airlines Executive Office, this is Jennifer. Jennifer, this is David Washington. I need you to patch me through to CEO Robert Sterling. Tell him his new majority shareholder needs to speak with him immediately. I'm sorry, sir, but Mr. Sterling is in meetings all day. If you'd like to leave a message. Jennifer, in about 30 seconds, your computer is going to show that I just purchased 51% of this company. When that happens, you're going to transfer me to Sterling immediately, or you're going to be looking for a new job. 30 seconds later. Mr. Washington, please hold for Mr. Sterling. The nearby passengers were now opally staring. A man in an expensive suit whispered to his wife, did he just say he owns the airline? Sandra finally hung up her security call and walked back over. Sir, security is on their way. I'm going to have to ask you to step aside. David held up one finger, the universal sign for wait one moment, as Sterling came on the line. Mr. Washington, I just got word about the stock purchase. Congratulations on your acquisition. How can Skybridge serve you today? David looked directly at Sandra as he spoke. Robert, I'm currently at gate A7 being harassed by your staff because they don't think I look wealthy enough to sit in business class. I'm watching your employees discriminate against paying customers based on their appearance. This is exactly why your stock price is in the toilet. The color drained from Sandra's face. Sir, Sterling's voice was panicked. I sincerely apologize. Let me connect you with our gate manager immediately. Don't bother, David said. I'll handle this personally. He hung up and looked at Sandra with a kind of smile that made smart people very, very nervous. Ladies and gentlemen, David announced, his voice carrying across the gate area, my name is David Washington, and as of 5 minutes ago, I became the majority owner of Skybridge Airlines. The gate area fell completely silent. You could hear phones buzzing as passengers started recording. Sandra's face went from pale to green. Kevin looked like he was about to throw up. Lisa took a step backward like David might explode. David continued, for the past 15 minutes, I've been discriminated against by your staff based solely on my appearance. I've been accused of theft, fraud, and treated like a criminal, all because I don't look like your typical business class passenger. He pulled out his phone and showed his banking app to the growing crowd. The account balance made several people gasp audibly. Sandra, David said, looking directly at the flight attendant who had started this whole mess, you just cost yourself your job, your pension, and probably your career in aviation. Kevin, same goes for you, and whoever else participated in this discrimination, congratulations, you just gave me the perfect reason to clean house at this airline. His phone rang, Sterling calling back. Robert, David answered on speaker phone, I want a full investigation into discrimination practices at this airline. I want every employee involved in this incident terminated immediately. And I want a complete overhaul of your hiring and training practices. Yes, sir. Absolutely, sir. Whatever you need. I also want you to personally apologize to every passenger who witnessed this discrimination. They deserve better than what they saw today. Sandra finally found her voice. Mr. Washington, I didn't know ... I was just following protocol ... David's voice cut through her excuses like ice, whose protocol says to treat paying customers like criminals based on their race and appearance. Whose protocol says to assume someone's boarding pass is fake without even checking your system. She had no answer. Sophie, the 8-year-old girl, started clapping, then her mother joined in. Within seconds, the entire gate area erupted in applause. That's justice, someone shouted. About time someone stood up to this, called out another passenger. A young woman with her phone out yelled, "This is going viral." #SkyBridgeDiscrimination is already trending. David looked around at the crowd of passengers, many of whom were still recording. I want you all to know that this is not how Skybridge Airlines will operate moving forward. Every single person deserves to be treated with dignity and respect, regardless of how they dress or what they look like. More applause. A businessman in an expensive suit approached David. "Sir, I travel 200,000 miles a year for business. I've seen this happen to many times. Thank you for actually doing something about it." David shook his hand. "What's your name?" "Marcus Thompson." "Marcus, how would you like to help me rebuild this airline the right way?" Meanwhile, Sandra was frantically texting on her phone, probably trying to figure out how to explain to her family that she'd just lost her job by discriminating against a billionaire. Kevin had already disappeared, presumably to pack up his things. Lisa approached cautiously. "Mr. Washington, I want you to know I didn't participate in this. I was just watching." David looked at her seriously. "Lisa, watching discrimination happen and doing nothing makes you complicit. But unlike your colleagues, you get a chance to redeem yourself. You're going to help train our new customer service standards." David's phone was now buzzing constantly. Text from Maria. "CNN wants a statement. Fox Business is calling. Skybridge stock up 15% since the news broke." But David wasn't focused on the media attention. He was thinking about systematic change. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced to the crowd, "what happened here today is not unique to Skybridge. This kind of discrimination happens every day in every industry. The difference is that today, someone with the power to change things was here to witness it." He pulled out a notepad and started writing. "I'm implementing new policies effective immediately. First, any Skybridge employee found guilty of discrimination will be terminated on the spot. Second, we're implementing bias training for every single employee. Third, we're creating a direct hotline for passengers to report discrimination, and those reports will come directly to my office." A passenger called out, "What about compensation for people who've been discriminated against?" David smiled. "Great question. I'm establishing a $50 million fund to compensate passengers who have been discriminated against by Skybridge in the past 5 years. If you've been treated unfairly, document it and submit it to our new customer advocacy office." The applause was deafening. Sophie's mother approached with her daughter. "Mr. Washington, Sophie wanted to thank you for standing up to the bullies." David knelt down to Sophie's level. "Sophie, what do you want to be when you grow up?" "A pilot," she said with a huge smile. "Well, when you're ready, Skybridge Airlines will have a full scholarship waiting for you in our pilot training program." Sophie's mother started crying. "Thank you so much." David's phone rang again. This time it was Robert Sterling calling from the corporate office, and David put it on speaker for everyone to hear. "Mr. Washington, I have the gate manager, regional director, and head of customer service all on the line. They want to personally apologize for this incident." "Robert, I don't want apologies, I want action. Here's what's going to happen. Sandra Mitchell and Kevin Barnes are terminated effective immediately. Their employee IDs are to be deactivated, and security is to escort them from all Skybridge properties." You could hear frantic typing in the background. "Done, sir. Is there anything else?" "Yes, I want every customer service employee at every Skybridge location to undergo mandatory bias training within the next 30 days. I want you to hire a chief diversity officer reporting directly to me. And I want monthly audits of customer complaints, specifically looking for patterns of discrimination. Absolutely, sir. We'll implement everything immediately. A passenger recording everything called out, "This is better than any movie I've ever seen." David looked at the crowd. This isn't entertainment. This is about basic human decency. No one should be treated as less than human because of how they look or dress. His phone buzzed with a text from his legal team. "David, social media is exploding. #Skybridge Justice has 2.3 million posts in the last hour." Every major news outlet is picking up the story, but David wasn't done yet. "Attention passengers," came an announcement over the gate's PA system. "Flight 847 to Los Angeles will now be boarding, Mr. Washington. As our new owner, would you like to board first?" David shook his head, "I'll board with everyone else. But I want every passenger on this flight to be upgraded to business class, complimentary. Consider it an apology for what you witnessed today." The crowd cheered as passengers began boarding. David noticed the crew had been completely replaced. A new head flight attendant, professional and respectful, greeted each passenger personally. When David reached his original seat, he found a handwritten note. "Mr. Washington, welcome aboard your airline. We promise to serve you and every passenger with the respect you deserve, Captain Rodriguez and the flight crew." During the flight, David worked on his laptop drafting policy changes. But he was interrupted every few minutes by passengers thanking him for standing up against discrimination. An elderly black gentleman from row 15 made his way to David's seat. "Son, I've been flying for 60 years. I've seen things you wouldn't believe. What you did today, that's going to change lives." David shook his hand. "Sir, what's your name?" "Walter Johnson. I was one of the first black pilots in commercial aviation." "Walter, how would you like to help me ensure that what happened to me today never happens to anyone else?" Walter's eyes filled with tears. "I'd be honored." As the plane descended into Los Angeles, David's phone showed 847 missed calls and over 2,000 text messages. CNN breaking news: Billionaire buys Airline after being discriminated against. Fox Business: stock market reacts to David Washington's Skybridge acquisition. TMZ: discrimination costs airline employees their jobs as billionaire seeks justice. But the story that mattered most was on a small blog called Voices of Color. 8-year-old girl's comment about discrimination leads to airline industry revolution. The article quoted Sophie, "I don't understand why adults are mean to people who look different. Mr. Washington showed them that being mean is expensive." Maria called as they were landing. "David, you need to see the numbers. Skybridge stock is up 47% since your purchase. But more importantly, we're getting calls from other airlines wanting to implement similar anti-discrimination policies." "That's the real victory," David replied. When they landed at LAX, David was surprised to see a crowd of reporters waiting at the gate. But he was even more surprised to see Sandra Mitchell, the flight attendant who had discriminated against him. She was crying. Sandra approached David cautiously, flanked by airport security. "Mr. Washington, I know I don't deserve to speak to you, but I wanted to apologize in person." David stopped walking. The crowd of reporters pressed closer, cameras rolling. "Sandra, do you understand what you did wrong?" She nodded, tears streaming. "I judged you based on your appearance. I assumed things about you that weren't true. I treated you like a criminal when you were just trying to travel like any other passenger. And I realize now that I probably did the same thing to other passengers. People who didn't have your resources to fight back." David studied her face. "Sandra, what you did cost you your job. But more importantly, it revealed a problem in this industry that affects thousands of people every day." The reporters were scribbling frantically. "I'm sorry," Sandra whispered. "I'm truly sorry." David was quiet for a long moment. Then, "Sandra, apologies are just words. What matters is action. I'm not going to give you your job back, that bridge is burned. But I am going to give you a chance to make this right." Her eyes looked up hopefully. "You're going to work with our new customer service training program. You're going to help us identify bias and discrimination in our policies. You're going to make sure that what you did to me never happens to anyone else." Sandra nodded vigorously. "Yes, sir, I'll do whatever it takes." David looked at the cameras. This isn't about revenge, it's about education. It's about creating a world where no child has to watch adults be cruel to each other based on appearance or race. He paused, thinking about Sophie's words. Change is expensive, but discrimination is even more expensive. Today, it costs jobs, reputation, and nearly cost a company its future. But tomorrow, because of what happened today, thousands of travelers will be treated with more dignity and respect. The crowd of onlookers, passengers, reporters, airport workers erupted in applause. David smiled and walked toward the exit, pulling out his phone to call Maria by me controlling interest in 3 more airlines. If this is happening at Skybridge, it's happening everywhere. Sir, that's going to cost about $8 billion. David looked back at the gate where all this started. Justice is never cheap, but it's always worth it. As he walked away, the last thing the cameras caught was Sophie and her mother at the gate, Sophie holding a toy airplane and telling her mom, "When I become a pilot, I'm going to be nice to everyone." And that, more than the stock prices or the headlines or the corporate policy changes, was the real victory. 6 months later, Skybridge Airlines reported the lowest discrimination complaint rate in the industry. Sandra Mitchell became the head of their bias prevention program. Sophie got her pilot lessons, and David Washington. He had quietly acquired 6 more airlines, transforming customer service standards across the entire industry. Because sometimes the most expensive lesson is the one that changes everything. If this story moved you, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories of justice served. Comment below. Have you ever witnessed discrimination? What did you do about it? And remember, we all have the power to stand up for what's right, even if we're not billionaires.